Hey guys, welcome back. So we have a little bit more information, and I'm going to tell you what we're thinking. We may still end up sending all this back. We're going to see. But we have a leading theory as to why all this metal showed up in my transmission. So when I bought this so everything I put in the car was new. Everything. So new converter, new transmission, new cooler, new lines, new drive shaft, everything. Well, here's the thing. The drive shaft, I paid a local Houston place to build it. I gave them all the dimensions and all that stuff. Anyway, I specifically asked them if they had a balancing machine when they built it, and they said yes, and everything would be good. So they built my drive shaft, and I hooked it all up, and it all fit fine, and I thought it looked good. But we drove the car, and once you got up to like 55, you could feel it shaking. So, I kind of knew right off the bat. I was like, well, either I got the pinion angle or whatever it's called, the tail shaft. Basically your diff and your trans need to be parallel. So I was thinking maybe I got that wrong, but I really tried to get it right, and I thought I had it right. So I was like, maybe that's wrong, or the drive shaft's just out of balance, which seems unlikely since it was brand new. So anyway, I get home, I park the car, I pick it up and look under it, and back here on the tail shaft, oil was pouring out. And I was like, uh-oh, that's weird. And I grabbed the basically drive shaft, and you could jiggle this. So that bushing had been destroyed. And I pulled the drive shaft, and you had to unbolt this tail housing, so you got to take all these bolts out. And I took it apart. The bushing was trashed, but I didn't see any metal. But the bushing was definitely wore out. So I got a new bushing, pressed it in there, bolted all this back up, put my drive shaft back in, and I basically just spun it. And once I put it in, it was tight after changing the bushing, but you couldn't wobble it. But when I put a dial indicator on the drive shaft and I spun it, it had like 20 or 30 thou of run out. So that's when I knew for sure. I was like, okay, drive shaft's bad. And long story short, I ended up having a second company build me a drive shaft because they tried to fix the old one, and the previous shop had done a horrible job building it. They just bodged it together. Very, very unprofessional. So the second shop really did a bang up job and built me a nice drive shaft. That's actually the one over here from, let me just double check. Pretty sure it's Randy's. Yeah, these guys are awesome. Randy's drive shaft. So if you ever need a drive shaft, there's their info. These guys do bang up work. So they upgraded me to chromoly for free. They balanced this thing perfectly. Chromoly tubing, just real good. I've never done anything to this. Bolted it in the car and it's worked great. So at that point, we get the car going. We start driving. Now it's smooth, and we drove it for, I can't really remember how long, but it wasn't too long, a few days, a month, something, and it starts leaking oil. And what happened was it blew out the gasket right here between the pump and the case. So right now you can see there's like one bolt there, but actually when you bolt the bell housing on, there's like bolts that go through the bell housing in there. So when you bolt those up, they go through, and that's what pinches the oil pump to the case. So I had torqued all those. I didn't put them super tight. I just kind of, I don't remember. I tightened them, but I didn't go crazy. And I didn't have enough torque on those. So it actually blew the gasket out, because this pump runs, I think, like 300 PSI or something like that. So anyway, long story short, had to pull the trans, pull the bell housing. You have to stand this transmission with the case pointing up. And then I pulled the oil pump, and sure enough, the gasket was blown. And I ended up making a gasket. I actually bought the correct one from these guys, but the shipping was slow. And I had gasket material, so I just made a gasket and bolted it. Took a while, but I made one, put it back together. And that's it. I don't think I've ever even had the pan off. No, I've had the pan off for something. I can't remember. Maybe when I bought it, I pulled the pan to look at it. I don't even remember. I know I'd seen the fancy billet valve body before. But anyway, that was about it. After that, I just drove it. And the thing is, I don't remember ever changing the fluid. I really haven't drove this trans very much. So a friend of mine named Marshall, he's also got his Miata's faster than mine, funny enough, and he's got auto in his, different auto, but still. I was talking to him, and he actually suggested that maybe one of these bushings failed, and that was the source of metal. And as soon as he said it, I was like, well, actually, I've had the back bushing fail before. And if you think about it, if that bushing were to fail, you got a seal right here, now that I'm looking at it, so the bushing's like back in this region. So any metal generated by this bushing would get flushed with fluid right into the trans. So that's kind of my leading theory at this point, is basically I bought this expensive brand new transmission, bolted it in my car, plugged in a brand new drive shaft that was faulty, and the first time I drove it, my shaking drive shaft took out the bushing and sent metal into my transmission. Now, if that's the case, this trans has been running around with metal in the filter since early 2017. Now, granted, it doesn't have a lot of miles on it and all that, but I think that's what happened. I think that's where this metal came from, because these are big pieces, so it would kind of match. I think bushings are typically made out of like softer metals, and I know aluminum's common in like bearings for motors, for example. So this may just be remnants of that bushing in the back, because I knew it wore out, and when I pulled the tail housing, I didn't see any metal. So at that point, I just kind of like, I don't know, and ignored it. But now that I think about it, it kind of makes sense. If that had made metal, the fluid, because these things have like an oil sprayer or something that literally like sprays oil on that to keep it lubricated. So it probably just flushed all the metal into the pan, and then over time it circulates and clogged up the filter, and all, just basically once it hit the filter, it stayed there forever. So I think that's what happened, and that would explain metal in the transmission. There is, however, one thing it doesn't explain, which is the flare on the 2-3 shift. Now, we don't know yet what caused that. I've got a theory. I got a feeling it has something to do with the band adjustment. So I haven't really looked. I'm looking now. I'm guessing this is how you adjust the band. I may try to do that and just see kind of like how it's adjusted. What's that? That's probably a fill plug or a pressure test port, actually. So that's probably the band adjustment. I don't know if there's actually another spot on here that even could be that. Let's see if I see anything over here. Oh yeah, there's something right there. So maybe that's it. Yeah, I'm not really sure. That's the only two I see though. So I bet it's one of those. But we're gonna call Performance Automatics tomorrow and talk to them. Because the last time I talked to him, we didn't know where the metal came from, and he looked at it and said, yeah, send it back, we'll do a refresh. But now that I think this bushing in the back, I'm not definitive, but I'd say, 90%, 95% chance, maybe even higher, because I know the bushing wore out. That's a fact, because I witnessed it, tight when I built it, loose when the drive shaft had damaged it, and it makes sense now with the seal in place that the metal would have had to go into the trans. So that does make sense. So at least some of this metal would have came from the bushing. And for now, I'm just going to say all of it, because I don't know of any other issues. So we're going to talk to Performance Automatic and see what they say. But maybe we can run this thing. Basically, try to clean it up some. Like I drained the converter. It was really clean. So, maybe dump some mineral spirits in it and clean that out as best we can. Maybe do the same to this. And then new filter and put it back together. There was a couple things that I noticed on this. So if you look at this, I did a separate video on this, but I'll just summarize it here. So you can actually see there's some wear marks on here. We see right there where it's not touching much. There it's touching a little. There it's touching a little. There's nothing you can feel, and there's nothing you can measure. You can just kind of see it's like a surface finish. Basically, like this is a little bit rougher. This is a little bit more polished. But there's no like step or anything right here. So there's a bushing that goes up in the trans, which is kind of hard to see. This camera is horrible at focusing at that bushing. But anyway, that bushing looks pretty good. There's a couple scratches on it, but if I had to guess, that's probably from debris circulating across it, and it scratched it, kind of like you see on like main bearings and rod bearings on a motor. If you get debris in them, you'll end up with a scratch or two on the bearing. It's kind of what you see on that bushing, but the bushing itself looks to be in good shape. It looks fine. So I got a feeling that bushing's okay, and this wasn't leaking either. So if that bushing had worn out too much, the converter will basically shake. And then there's a seal that goes here that seals on this bore. I'm guessing this little line you see right here, that's probably where the seal touches. And we didn't see any, this didn't leak. All of this was dry. I did wipe the converter off, but this was all dry. So I don't think that was leaking either. So we're going to see what PA says tomorrow. But I'm definitely leaning towards new filter, clean everything, and just put it back in the car. The only reservation I have is that flare on the 2.3. I really would like to fix that, and I don't know what's causing it at this time. Maybe it's the band adjustment, maybe it isn't. I just don't know yet. But anyway, that's kind of the update right now. We have more information now than we did yesterday. And since I haven't shipped it yet, we're going to spend the next day or two before we ship it back. We're going to talk to PA, see what they say. Because frankly, my guess is that once I tell them that, oh yeah, that bushing, and that's probably where the metal came from, at that point, I doubt they're going to warrant. They'll probably fix it, but they're going to charge me for it. But granted, I'm paying, as Marshall pointed out, I'm already paying like $600 or so for shipping. So, if they charge me another, I don't know what a rebuild costs, but presumably not that much. From what I understand, the parts are actually cheap. The hard parts are expensive, but none of that should be damaged. It'll probably just be like steels, frictions, seals, a couple of bearings, something like that. So my guess, rebuild wouldn't be super expensive anyway. But we're gonna talk to them. We're gonna do a little more research and make a decision. But I'm really hoping that we can, put this thing back in the car and get that 2.3 fixed and run this thing. So anyway, that's all I got. Y'all take it easy.